Hello and welcome to the 1916 Company. I am Tim Mosso. This is Watches Tonight. This evening, I go into depth on a rather personal topic, why I sold each of the watches I've sold. We also chat live and I share your wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. Already in the box, Eddie Landsberg, Soma R, 24 degrees, staying up late in London. A. Charles, we have Richard Combs, we have Robert Dixon of Scotland, and Richard from South Florida, Rich Mitch, Michael A. from Orlando, McLauder, Mark S. from Brooklyn. Welcome to all of my regulars. Okay, while we file in and we fill the chat, let's warm up, and you guys can do me a favor. Open up a different window, keep me streaming, but check out my Instagram at Tim_Mosso, and you can see all of my 1-minute reviews of the best watches that cross my desk. Things that introduce, well, even me to nuance. There are watches here that I'm seeing for the first time, and I'm doing it along with you. This is the best of the best. Some watches are not even listed on our website, and I always find them intriguing, else they wouldn't be there, because this is a personal Instagram. So check out Tim_Mosso with occasional insights into my lifestyle and interests. So, we have Whedon Watches from South Jersey, Watch Bronco joining in from Bahrain, staying up super late, maybe even super early at this point. Junior Johnson from Michigan, Moto Gunner from Athens, Georgia. Jim Millett from the UK, Marceau Retard, Dave Opencar. We've got Madi K joining in with Andrew T, Enrique Cassiano, and Faisal joining in from Hertfordshire. And BNS making the show live with Yima from Sydney, who's definitely getting up early with us. Tim Mancuso in the box saying I have to buy that Languntina. It's in my office right now, and I'm going to be putting it up on Instagram fairly soon. So I'm holding it for you, Tim. Don't worry. But fewer wrist shots. I asked, you answered, and now you're on my screen. Marcio M. of Richmond, Virginia, getting us started with his Patek Philippe Calatrava Pilot Travel Time. This is the midsize, the 7234G in white gold. Scott N. posts a stunning collection of dream watches, and I mean really stunning collection, from top tier brands. He's got a bit of everything in there. We have Jonathan C. from Miami, our old neck of the woods from the Watch You Want days, hitting the road with his Patek Philippe 5235G Regulator Annual Calendar. My favorite Patek of all time? Darn close. Nathaniel K. reports from Delos in Greece with his Vacheron Constantin Cédalil, and what a shot of the Med. Jeff S. hits the road with his Ferrari 812 and Hublot Big Bang Unico with camo. It's the Stormtrooper. Guys, send your wrist shots to MondayMailbag at thewatchbox.com or the1916company.com. Whether you want to go contemporary or vintage, it's your choice. Both emails work. Lloyd Kerr in the box. Dr. Stu, one of my boys from Pennsylvania. We've got Hazel Bolivar. We've got John A. from Wales, staying up late in the UK. And Herb. We've got Motu. We've got Vincent S. Hello from the west coast of France. Let's reach 300 concurrent viewers tonight. I agree. Let's do it, guys. And let's start with a topic that is very personal. You know, a few years back, I sold most of my watches, my Jaeger LeCoultre collection. What I never discussed too in depth was why I sold the watches. And tonight we're really going to look into that on a watch-by-watch basis that sort of explores my career as a JLC collector and also how I let go. So, first, let me dispel a common misperception about me. I'm still very much a watch collector, I'm just not a prolific one. My interest today primarily concerns micromechanics and watchmaking, which you can see right there. That's a 7750 I was taking down. Watches made by my friends in the industry, including the Mr. Roboto Bronzo Artist series that I'm wearing tonight, and vintage American pocket watches. Again, that's another one of my projects. But like many myths, popular misconception about my collecting does have a kernel of truth to it. I don't buy often, and I sold all of my publicly known watches some years ago, 6 years ago now. Can you believe it's been that long? At the time, I had my reasons, foremost among them, and this was my mistake, belief that my time in the watch industry was drawing to a close and that I would need the money for what came next. Prior to that, I was a hardcore collector, a monobrand collector of Jaeger LeCoultre. The focus on scholarship and ownership of a single brand, to me, was hugely appealing. I'm a super nerd and I love to go super deep. And so this was both something that interested me and something that was consistent with my inherent nature. And I had internalized the writings of James Dowling, particularly concerning the merits of a strongly themed collection and what that brings to your own enjoyment of collecting. Focus on the brand and its most important historical features seemed like a winner for me. At its peak, my collection, and that's it right there, included 9 JLC references, all of which embodied some significant technology, style, model line, or traditional competence distinctive of Jaeger LeCoultre. While I sold all of these watches for the same overarching cause, the individual sales, that is, each watch out the door, rationalized in a very different way. I felt that I needed individual reasons to let go of things that were so dear to me and very personal. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something I was eager to do because letting go is hard and this is an emotional hobby. And this is the first time I've given full insight into that thought process. Okay, let's see what we got going on here. We've got Moto Gunner saying, I am a super JLC fan. Guys, I did keep one and I'm going to talk about that too. Moto Gunner saying, can't afford to collect JLC quite yet. Jim Millett saying, a few of us from the UK in the chat tonight. You know I appreciate it. We have Cardinal joining from Valparaiso, Indiana in the Great American Heartland, wearing his Breitling B1. Thomas Burnett. We've got Harry Singh from Australia getting up early, and Sean Hansen with Adam Conrad and Peter 2704. Welcome, guys. We've got Agab joining in from New York City, local to us, one of our East Coast New Yorkers from my old homeland. Okay, so let us talk about viewer wrist chats, because there's just a lot of them and they're really good tonight. Eric M captures my kind of watches and wheels with his Kona Hanzo ST mountain bike and Vacheron Constantin overseas. Tarek H warms up with his Moser Endeavor, fine pens, glasses, and some cappuccino. And not one, two. We've got 1A of Miami, again, our old stomping grounds from the Watch You Want days, proven that Vacheron is popular tonight on our show with his overseas self-winding. Seen on the strap, we don't often see this watch on the rubber strap, but it's a good look. Benjamin H drives his Mark 8 VW Golf R with ink and his Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch latest edition. That's a really good look on the bracelet, by the way, the mesh bracelet straight bar. I haven't seen this yet. It's a success. Stephen E offers a colorful cuff in more ways than one with his Hermes H08 titanium. And you know what I say, the world needs more orange watches. Send your wrist chats to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your watch on this box. Okay, so back to why I sold each of my watches and also some of my regrets. And I do have regrets. So let's start this discussion with my heaviest pieces. All of these departures, and with all of these departures, my reasoning revolved around notions of function, aesthetics, fit, and condition. And some of that condition includes accessory sets and whether the watches were naked. So, Reverso Platinum No. 2 Tourbillon. This was the achievement of my final grail. I know we debate whether a grail watch is something you can actually own or something that's always been beyond reach. Well, at different points in my life, this seemed to be both. First, unimaginable, and then later, I couldn't imagine that it was on my wrist. What was it? Well, a 500-piece Platinum limited edition, the second Platinum Reverso model ever made, and it was the second Reverso Tourbillon to be made. And guys, why I bought it? Because $144,000 in 2003 money became 35 grand by the time I bought it. Outrageous use of materials, design, and decoration. Look at that movement. The 848 caliber was solid white gold. Côte de Soleil, blued screws, mirrored anglage, as good as it gets. The dial was white gold, painted with sterling silver paint by hand. The Grand Taille case, the perfect size for me. 26 by 42. The ultimate in discretion. Platinum white metal. Doesn't stick its head above the parapet. Not rose, not yellow gold. No one notices it. The dial again. Super gorgeous with hand-painted Breguet numerals and a coaxial power reserve underneath the hands. With case-back tourbillon, I hate dial-side tourbillon watches, so I liked the fact that you could hide this one when you wanted, and yes, it did remind me a little bit of the monotone DeLorean. Why I sold it? Okay, so lack of full sets became a post-purchase regret for me on every watch I ever bought without the box and papers. I would have preferred to pay 10 to 15% more to feel like I had the whole thing. For me, a watch that is naked or too polished almost feels like the best possible Porsche 993 you find online, and then you find out that it's got a Carfax because it's been hit, and the passion is gone. That's how I feel about naked watches that have been polished. Also, there was the looming cost of service on a white gold tourbillon movement, and I realized that if I stayed in this collection, this watch was going to force me to recalibrate what it costs to service a watch. And while I don't think it would have been 5 figures, it would have been deep into 4 and easily the price of a watch in its own right. And again, I knew there was a problem here. Naked without a set, and I knew it had been polished, and that really bothered me. So, still, no watch I've ever owned has inspired such awe and wonder from other collectors and even people who knew or cared nothing for watches. It communicated how special it was without words and without watch literacy even. It was that incredible. It's also the only watch I ever owned for free. I got in and out for $35,000. Okay, so that was my Platinum No. 2 tourbillon. In 2010, I discovered for the first time what it meant to have a Grail watch. The Duometre Chronograph in white gold. What was it? It was a 200-piece limited edition, 42 millimeters in white gold, twin mainspring barrels, and one escapement inside caliber 380. It was literally 2 movements in one column wheel chronograph. Look at that movement. No loss of power reserve or amplitude with the chronograph running, and it's the only chronograph that can boast both those distinctions. This Grail included 2 power reserves, foudroyant seconds, an absolute circus to watch, and a digital minute counter disc for the single-digit minutes. I saved for 4 years to own this. And I thought about it every day. I looked at a picture of it every day to stay motivated, and then I owned it for 4 more years after that. Why I bought it? Well, my Duometre was, after all, by the time I finally got it, a more than $50,000 watch that I bought from an AD, an authorized dealer in Italy with warranty for 35 grand. I bargained well. The original Duometre in yellow gold was cool, and in a cerebral sense, I liked the concept of the movement, but I couldn't fall in love with this frumpy combination of a silver dial and a yellow gold case. But the black dial was fierce, and I mean fierce. This thing had heat coming off of it. The coolest looking watch I have ever owned, and running the chronograph was an absolute event. People's eyes popped out. Like a cartoon, their eyes popped out. Caliber 380 was built and finished like a Longa. Not just the quality of the finish itself, but also the depth, the architecture, and the use of German silver. Not something you often see on Swiss watches. And the idea here is that, like a Longa wristwatch, this was designed to evoke a pocket watch, a specific pocket watch from the JLC Museum that inspired the Duometre chronograph. And in its day, this watch shamed both the Diatograph and the Patek Philippe 5070. So why did I sell it? Well, here's why. If I was going to be serious about building a war chest for my next career, anything worth this much money had to go, and I didn't lose much on it. Money was the first and last consideration behind this sale because I was infatuated with the watch, and it was the most accurate mechanical watch I ever owned. Really, no other reason. I loved that watch. Even next to the Audemars Piguet Jules Audemars Chronometre with AP escapement, a $250,000 watch, my Duometre never looked overmatched. I can't say that AP looks a lot more expensive than my JLC, despite costing about 5 times as much. That's a big win for JLC, and that's only from an aesthetic standpoint. What a watch that was. Okay, my Grand Memovox. Before I jump into that, let me take a look at what's going on in the box. All right, we've got 256 viewers. Guys, let's try to get that up to 300. When you hit that magic number, it does incredible things for the week-long on-demand views of this show. Jim Millett saying, hit that thumbs up, guys, and I second that. We have Rick Foss saying, these are crazy prices, Tim. Nick saying, the white metal is my choice too. BCY with an eye-popping emoji, which I definitely appreciate. And Ashley K397, Tim, what did you think your career was going to be? I thought it was my obligation to go out and get some sort of professional graduate or doctoral degree. I felt very embarrassed that I'm a career YouTuber in my 30s then. I'm 40 now. I don't know. I still swallow that YouTuber epithet like a bitter pill, but I've got a great crew, I've got a great job, and I've got a great audience on YouTube, so I'll stick it out a little bit longer. And that's kind of why I changed my mind. And then Lloyd Kerr saying, collecting only one brand is hard. I've been firmly entrenched in Doxaland for the past 4 years, and I consider myself a Doxa guy first and foremost, but I do have other brands in my collection. Okay, and Marty K asking, Tim, for 20,000 and less, what's the best finished movement with your famous internal angles? That would be the new Dan Reuter chronograph. Dan's now charging 10 grand for his watches, but in exchange for that, you're not just getting internal angles, you're getting full skeletonization on some of the parts with internal angles. And Faisal, you know, I interested to know what I planned next and why I didn't go ahead with it. I realized I had a pretty good gig here, and I do still love the watches, and I still love the people, even if I think it's kind of dinky and stupid to be a YouTuber. Again, I deal with it for the other privileges that come with the job. Okay, now, Grand Memovox, the first watch I bought after joining the watch industry. This was the third of my big heavies. So what was it? Launched in 2001, the Grand Memovox was a blue dial platinum case, 250-piece limited edition, 41.5 millimeters. It was a Memovox wrist alarm with an IWC Kurt Klaus perpetual calendar system. So quite sophisticated. It was both a great alarm and a great perpetual calendar. Full platinum clasp from JLC at a time when JLC still matched platinum clasps to platinum buckles. Today they don't. They give you white gold. Why I bought it? Well, it combined two of my favorite complications. The perpetual calendar, which is a sort of mechanical computer that's almost magic to me, and the alarm, which I think is the most practical complication. Between a second time zone and an alarm, if I'm traveling, I want the alarm. And when I'm not traveling, I want the alarm even more. It was an early 2000s product from a time when mega complications were still of a wearable size. They got big fast during the later 2000s. The weight of this perpetual calendar. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely incredible with a massive case, a solid platinum case back, and that full clasp. It was almost 200 grams. It was pretty close to half a pound. What a watch. For a relatively small complication, it weighed all the money. You felt it in your hand and it just felt like a $100,000 watch. No watch I've ever owned has been so heavy. It was a matter of fascination for everyone who ever encountered my Grand Memovox. I would hand it to them and they would be shocked and amazed. I let my sister's husband wear it at their wedding and he was stunned by how massive that watch was. He was more nervous about damaging the watch that day than he was about getting married. So you know it had an effect. Why? I sold it. More than any watch I've ever owned, it was a mechanical thing. And the Memovox this Grand Memovox was prone to stalling overnight. I would wind it constantly in the morning and before bed, which seemed unacceptable for such a watch. The perpetual calendar doesn't suffer stalling well, and it becomes tiresome to wake up in the morning after a 30-day month and see the watch stalled during the changeover. All of that despite recent JLC factory service and the fact that these blue dial platinum platinum JLC automatics featured ultra-dense platinum winding masses that should have made them more efficient winders. I don't know what it was about this watch, but it just couldn't keep going under its own power. And it was weird about it. You know, I would wind it at bedtime and it would be stopped in the morning. So I couldn't even figure out how to keep it going if I put in my own time and energy to the mainspring. So this watch was as mechanically flaky as my 15-year-old Audi, which on some subliminal level is probably why I shot this photo of the two of them together. In both cases, when they worked, they were wonderful. The Grand Memovox probably committed its mortal sin and punched its ticket out of my collection on the night of February 28th, 2016, when it stopped running. I woke up and I saw on Perpetual Calendar Day, it was still February 28th. I didn't sell immediately, but the decision was made shortly after I woke up on February 29th. Okay, in the box, Faisal saying, life's journey, not a destination. Stan de Monteverde, Tim, what do you think is the best one-piece collection for under $3,000? I'd say go out and get yourself a 41.5mm used, but still under warranty, Oris Aquis Date Caliber 400. That would be an easy choice. What else is going on here? We have BCY saying you could still go back to school if you wanted. Well, that's good. Hold out hope forever. I don't plan watches to be my last act. What else is going on here? We have Mr. Zoso saying, I love alarm watches. Most of them are still very affordable considering the complication in a mechanical watch. The Vulcain is a nightmare to reset. Just remember, it sets using a clutch differential. The button is a clutch, there's only one crown. It's very different from a Memovox. What else is going on here? RS, Tim, what did you think about the AP Jules Audemars? Are we talking about that chronometer? It was a crazy thing, and it came with the longest form chronometer certificate I've ever seen, and a box big enough to use as a steamer trunk. Okay, jumping back in, guys, where are we now? 308 viewers? You made my night. Can we get greedy now? Can we talk 320, 330, maybe 350? Let me know, guys, but stick with me. Okay. Viewer shots number 3, Michael W. of Bavaria, Germany, sports his rare Rolex Oyster Quartz cased but automatic date, reference 1530, and his 1975 Porsche 911 Targa. James L. and his Chinese-made Atelier Wen Perception visit a much older and larger Chinese creation, the Great Wall. Emmanuel T. and his Tissot PRX Powermatic 80 take in my interview with collector Reggie V. Definitely recommended. Reggie was an incredible guest. Muhammad E. shops for his next watch with the Vacheron Constantin overseas tourbillon in the Dubai Mall. Gareth from Hertfordshire, we got a lot of Hertfordshire on the show tonight, visits the wing on the Bremont factory tour with his very own. And in front you see a competition spec Austin Healey. I love my British cars. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your watch on this box and your pieces on these pixels. Why I sold each of my watches and my regrets. So the Platinum Reverso No. 2 Duometre Chronograph and Grand Memovox comprised the majority of my financial investment in the watch collection, but they were only 3 out of my total of 9. While I didn't feel the same pressure to sell the other 6 to generate revenue, I had my reasons, and here they are. My Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm Tides of Time Memovox was the first fine watch I ever bought myself, and I mean like really fine watch, horlogerie. 2010 was the year I bought it to celebrate my 26th birthday and also commemorate reaching the top runtime on the US Navy PRT test. What it was: 350-piece limited edition, 2009 model year, titanium and steel with internal spring shock absorbers, making it almost indestructible, 100-meter water resistance via the compressor crowns. It had a world timer, an alarm with a digital setting scale that's the most precise I've ever seen, quick release lugs that still allowed you to use any 22mm strap. It didn't have a proprietary system, but it had a quick release. It also had 2 straps, one in rubber, one in textile and leather, plus an extra clasp. Why I bought it? Well, the Callo Tim Mosso was thrilled by the idea of owning an haute horlogerie watch, and I still feel that excitement when I see that old dial. Also, I negotiated a 35% discount with an authorized dealer that had had the watch for over a year, and that seemed too good to pass up. The watch had so many features that it felt like if I bought this one, it's almost like I owned a bunch of different watches. The box and the presentation were grandiose and stunning, frankly. For my first boxed set, this was a hell of a start. It was enough to impress me such that I considered it a factor in buying the watch. Lots also, I was like one of the pack at the time, lots of other young naval officers had giant watches, and it was that time when young professionals were just starting to buy expensive watches, and I mean people in like their 20s and 30s. And I was part of that generation that considered such a thing after years of that age group having pretty much no interest in watches. Also, when I wore my Omega Seamaster, I received all kinds of uncomfortable probing about my finances and wealth from both officer and enlisted on base, and the extreme world alarm seemed like, and proved to be, so far off the radar that nobody else on base had the slightest idea what it was or what it cost. I had ironic privacy and anonymity wearing this, even though it cost 5 times as much as the Omega. I literally had zero understanding, too, of the relationship between wrist size and case size. So this watch was way too big for me, but I didn't go online and read 46.4 millimeter and immediately realized this was going to be ridiculous. I just pressed yes, check out, called the guy at the dealer, I made a bank deposit, and the watch was with me in 2 days. So, again, too big, but I didn't know what too big meant at a time when I'd hardly tried on any watches. So why I sold it? Well, I had literally zero understanding of the relationship between watch and wrist size. The reason I bought it is also the reason I sold it. It looked comical at 46.4 on my wrist. Almost every new watch collector makes mistakes, and this one was mine from a sizing standpoint. I could only wear it on the rubber strap that you see right here because it didn't fit me on the leather one. The size and the bombast of the Extreme, style-wise, was not me. It's not my personality. I'm not an outgoing public person in spite of the fact that I'm doing this right now. It's not my nature. It's going against my nature. And oversized sports watches are out of character for this guy, who's not likely to go offshore or make a big bang, to coin a phrase. Okay, let's see what's going on in the box. We have Mr. Zoso saying not big, massive. That watch was both big and massive. We have Mahdi saying, I think there's no brand like JLC releasing such a mechanical marvel for less than 40 grand and some under 20K used. I bought that one new for 11.5. That was a good deal back then. Last listed retail was 22,000. We got Julia Gray joining in. Have you ever visited a watch you sold? Meaning, have I ever seen it on a wrist after I sold it? No, I never have, but I would love to get in contact with the guy who bought my old Duometre and see where he is today. Also, the guy who bought my Zin, because that was a charity auction, I would like to say thank you to him. Okay, we have Herr Ekbo saying, I remember you once tossed that shock-resistant watch on the floor during a show. It was true. I tossed it a couple of times to demonstrate how shock-resistant it was, and sure enough, it was fine. Now, I have loved cars longer than I've loved watches, and I'm still very close to the car community. I consider it to be my original passion. My JLC Amvox 2 chronograph was a watch I wore to my first interview with Watch You Want at the very beginning of my career in watches, and its charming combination of innovation and automotive imagery meant it was the JLC that got the most wrist time of anything in the collection. More often than not, in the morning, I had a choice of all of them, I would pick this. What it was: 44 millimeters in grade 5 titanium, 750 pieces, launched in 2006. JLC signed a 10-year cooperation deal with Aston Martin cars, and unlike most car watch crossovers, the Amvox models were designed from scratch as a freestanding model line, not modifications of existing models. The watch used a pusherless chronograph system that had no crowns at all. Instead, it had an articulated case on ball bearings, and it could be pressed at 12 or 6 o'clock to start, stop, and reset, even if you were wearing racing gloves. Because you know those little screw-down crowns on a famous motorsports chrono are not usable if you're wearing gloves. With this, no problem. It also had a lockout system, so if you didn't want to start, stop, or reset, there was a slider on the case flank that could lock out the chrono while it was running. It was a brilliant system. Why I bought it? Well, I love cars, and this was a great car watch crossover, one of the best, maybe the best ever. Also, I actually like Aston Martin specifically as a brand, so this was right on point for me. Finally, there was the specific design of the Amvox, which was colorful, creative, had great dial depth, and really incorporated everything I love about automotive instruments on a dashboard, especially vintage gauges, but it didn't seem pandering or overt or exclusively branded to represent anything other than the actual Jaeger gauges used in Aston Martin cars. So it was an organic partnership too. And that made a lot of sense to me. This was not astroturfed. That is from the 50s. The inventive chronograph system was brilliant, and it worked really well, and the feel of the column wheel and the ball bearing actuators was as sharp as any I've ever experienced. I've often said if Richard Mille designed and built this, it would have cost $250,000. And despite the 44mm size, the watch wears small, and it was a good fit for me. So you might ask, if I loved it so much, why did I sell it? Well, I began to turn against naked watches after a year or so in the watch industry, partly from seeing how carelessly such watches are often handled by the original owners, and partly from seeing the impact on collectability. I really began to turn away from watches that didn't have full boxed sets. And I would also say more than any other watch I owned, this one exhibited signs of several and clumsy refinishes, which really bothered me. Because it's like a modern clear coat car that's been repainted. It just, if like you own one of those and the detailer finds evidence of it, you don't want the detailer to tell you because it's going to ruin your relationship with the car. And that's how I felt here with all the refinishes of a case that really traded on sharp creases and fine details, and mine had lost a lot of that. It takes skill and experience to refinish titanium to a high standard, and people without either had retouched this watch. That's why I sold my Amvox. Guys, 400? Are you kidding me? Are we going to see 400 tonight? We're at 366. Stay with me. I guarantee it'll be worth your while. We're only getting warmed up. Okay, I was a serious Reverso skeptic until shortly before I left for boot camp in 2009. While I had seen them on the wrists of older associates during my first job and in many photos online, my prejudice against the revolving case left me cold. And that's ironic because the Reverso is a big part of JLC history and identity. What I expected from this case was a mechanism that felt like a cheap stamped deployant clasp, rife with play and imprecision. But a trip to the Roosevelt Field Mall on Long Island with my great aunt led me to an encounter with a used Reverso duo at Tourneau. It was crisp, precise, and it commanded my respect. I was incredibly converted. I was from a skeptic to an evangelist. My mind was changed. So, what did I get? Well, I got the Reverso Night and Day, which is a type of Reverso duo. 26mm wide by 42mm end to end in white gold. It had two dials, one on each side, with different independent time zones and a lovely day and night indicator on the dial. Why I bought it? Well, I knew I wanted a black dial Reverso. I knew I wanted the grande case size from having tried it. I knew I wanted a dual time Reverso with the complication of a second time zone, and this rare model had all three. It also came with lovely white Breguet numerals and lume, which is an unusual thing on a Reverso for both sides to be luminescent. So, you can see right there, that's actually still my avatar photo on Watch Pro site. I post under that photo to this day. So why I sold it? Well, I realized with this and other precious metal watches, really, because this got a lot of wrist time, how vulnerable precious metal watches really are. You need hypervigilance and awareness to keep them clear of dents and gouging. Scratches and swirls from your cuff, they're just unavoidable. So the watch was also naked without box and papers, and you know how I felt about that. I feel more so now. Also, I struggled more and more as time progressed, and that started to turn me against this watch. I didn't travel enough to need a dual time, and when I did, I tended to wear two watches, partly because by that point I was like a character in the watch industry, and partly because by wearing two watches, I can have home and I can have local time, and I can do it while enjoying two of my watches rather than just one. It's a rare time when you can do that and get away with it, with a little bit of license, so to speak. And as ever, the evidence of polishing on this watch was rife, and if you've ever seen a Reverso, you realize how detailed and nuanced the case is, and as soon as you start to polish it, you lose that. And that counts double on a case as complicated and detailed as a Reverso. Jumping in the box, Mirrored Anglage asking, what JLC did you keep, Tim? I kept my Snowdrop Memovox, my E877, the vintage lugless 1974 Memovox alarm with the black dial. That's the one I kept, and I still have it to this day. It's on indefinite loan to a very, very close friend who I consider to be family. So she can keep it as long as she likes, but technically we share it. If I need to wear it to an event, I do. All other times, it's hers. And then right here, Jim Millett saying, ceramic is a game changer, Abdul. That is a fact. If you don't like scratches, swirls, and marks on your watches, Zintegument, Damasco ice hardening, or ceramic. It is the way to go. Okay, why I sold each of my watches. I decided early on that black dials, or at least dark dials, were going to be a theme within a theme for my collection. While unplanned, I also wound up with a preponderance of dress watches in an era when that genre seems less favored than sporting models. At some point, I decided that calendar wristwatches, always dress style in JLC history, are a unique tradition in JLC history. And the record on this appears unbroken back to at least the 1930s in caliber 412. My Master Moon was a fine example of this breed. What was it? 37 millimeters in stainless steel, a triple calendar with moon phase, a 1990s era design that was continuously built into the early 2000s. Why I bought it? Well, this was the full package. Durable in steel, black dial, full boxed set, and perfectly sized for my wrist. Why I sold it? Honestly, there's no standout reason here. It wasn't particularly delicate or scratch prone, wasn't expensive to service, it was just a few $100, didn't stall overnight like my other calendar watch, and it wasn't worth so much that I felt I needed to sell it to raise funds. I think more than anything, this watch was just a casualty of my desire to burn the ships, so to speak, and commit heart and mind fully to a future that I envisioned outside the watch industry. That's really all I can say about my Master Moon. It was a great little watch. Now, Jaeger LeCoultre also has a tradition of ultra-thin movements. Dating back to 1907, when they made the razor-thin caliber 145, LeCoultre and later Jaeger LeCoultre specialized in this kind of watchmaking. Caliber 145 was also the inspiration behind 2020's Kingsman knife limited edition of 100. That watch, 4 millimeters thick, was powered by JLC caliber 849, which is 1.85 millimeters thick. So what did I buy? I bought my stainless steel Master Ultra Thin 34, which was powered by that same caliber 849. Why I bought it? Well, at 34 millimeters in steel with a black dial and 5 millimeter thick case, this was exactly what I wanted. There's a thinner version with a solid case back, but I wanted this one with the display sapphire, because the caliber 849, especially in its 1990s guys like mine, was a real looker and extensively hand-finished. It's not as hand-finished today. It was something really special back then. There was also zero Richemont-era cost-cutting at work on this movement, which traces its ancestry back to a 1950s ultra-thin ebauche created by JLC for Vacheron and Audemars Piguet. 34 millimeters was no problem. My Master Ultra-Thin looked fantastic on my arm, and I've seen even bigger men wear it well. So why I sold it? Well, the main reason was a tragic one. A client broke it. I left a client alone for a few minutes after showing him the watch. After he left, I found the watch wouldn't run. Faced with a certain full overhaul service charge to correct the condition, I left the watch in my watch box for 2 years before throwing it into my package deal to sell the collection. I only got $1,000 or so for it, and I was later told by the watchmakers that they discovered a train jewel that had been displaced by some sort of shock, creating a zero end shake condition on the drivetrain, which stopped the caliber's operation situation, so that's what it was. Do I have regrets? Yes, some. First, that I bailed on the basis of a future that never arrived. I could have kept all of those watches without compromising my future. Second, that I didn't just go out and buy a better preserved full set Amvox 2, because I loved that watch. Third, that I didn't keep the Duometre if I was going to keep just one. Fourth, that I didn't have my current knowledge of watch mechanics when I gave up on the Master Ultra Thin, or who knows, maybe I could have fixed it myself. Finally, we have my Zinn EasyM 1.1, which I consider separate from all of this because I sold it 4 years later after wearing it pretty much exclusively, my only watch for 4 years, and it was also the watch most closely identified with me after the JLC collection. And unlike others, this one departed a hero for a charity auction, and I had no regrets there. We probably set the record for a Zinn at auction. Okay, viewers' shots number 4. Bogdan I and his Tudor Black Bay 58 Navy Blue watch the final stage of the Tour de France. Kunal M and his Sartori Biard SB04 prepare to ride Japan's famous Shinkansen bullet trains. We have Abdul R of Germany. He's in the box now. He's on your screen. He took his Nomos Campus Club foraging for mushrooms, which I initially took to be Cheetos. Hey, I was close. Landon M captures a summer shot with his wife's cherry-themed swatch while picking cherries, and Jason N takes us home with the Reservoir Hydrosphere Dive Watch Retrograde and the new Bugatti Tourbillon Hypercar. How many car guys are going to call that the Tourbillon, not knowing any better? Let's begin the count. Guys, thanks so much. We had Garrett tonight on the switcher. We had Kenny watching, a great studio audience. And thanks to you for making the best job in the world possible. Time out, Tim out. Thanks for logging on.